Pi Network's latest messaging represents a strategic pivot. Rather than emphasizing exchange listings, token price, or market cap rankings, they're highlighting digital payments, local merchant testing, and practical daily usage. This repositioning is deliberate. If you can't win the exchange listing game, just redefine the playing field to metrics where you can actually demonstrate progress. The core narrative is that Pi prioritizes actual economic activity over speculative trading. We're talking about merchants testing Pi payments in local commerce, developers building everyday utility tools, and peer-to-peer transactions that solve real problems. This is blockchain as infrastructure, not just an investment vehicle. It's a compelling story. Bitcoin's early adopters weren't traders, they were cypherpunks using it for censorship-resistant payments. Ethereum's value emerged from developers building DeFi protocols, not from exchange volume. So, if Pi can demonstrate genuine merchant adoption and payment utility, exchange listings become validation of existing activity rather than the primary goal. Pi's mobile-first low-energy model genuinely eliminates barriers that prevent blockchain participation in emerging markets. There's no need for expensive mining hardware, no significant electricity costs, and no technical expertise required. Really, just a smartphone and daily engagement. This accessibility matters enormously in countries like Nigeria, Brazil, and Vietnam, where smartphone penetration far exceeds computer ownership, where electricity costs prohibit traditional mining, and where populations seek financial alternatives to unstable local currencies or limited banking access. Pi's claim of strong activity in these markets is strategically significant. These are exactly the use cases where cryptocurrency's value proposition is strongest: cross-border remittances without Western Union fees, store of value during currency devaluation, financial inclusion for the unbanked. If Pi can demonstrate measurable adoption in these contexts, they've found product-market fit that matters more than Coinbase lists. Pi's emphasis on payments, applications, and peer-to-peer transactions rather than trading charts is philosophically correct. Sustainable cryptocurrency value comes from utility driving organic demand, not from speculation creating temporary price pumps. But this framework creates accountability requirements. If you're claiming daily usage matters more than price, you must demonstrate measurable daily usage, transaction volumes, merchant acceptance rates, payment processing statistics, DApp, engagement metrics. Without quantifiable usage data, utility over speculation becomes indistinguishable from another form of speculation, hoping that utility will eventually materialize. Hold up real quick. Damn space onsen. If this analysis of Pi's strategic repositioning from exchange focus to utility focus is clarifying what they're actually attempting, show some appreciation with that like button. And if you're serious about understanding blockchain projects through execution metrics rather than marketing narratives, subscribe to TJ Crypto World right now. We're demanding accountability while everyone else just amplifies announcements. Alright, let's examine the emerging market strategy. Pi's focus on Nigeria, Brazil, and Vietnam isn't random. These countries represent ideal conditions for cryptocurrency adoption. Nigeria has the world's highest cryptocurrency adoption rate per capita, driven by Naira instability and remittance corridors. Brazil has massive smartphone penetration and a population frustrated with banking fees and currency volatility. Vietnam has a young, tech-savvy population seeking financial alternatives. These markets also share common characteristics: significant unbanked populations, expensive traditional remittance services, mobile-first internet usage, and openness to digital financial solutions. If blockchain is going to achieve mainstream adoption, it likely starts in these environments rather than developed markets where traditional finance already works reasonably well. Pi targeting these geographies demonstrates strategic sophistication. They're not competing with Ethereum for DeFi developers or with Bitcoin for institutional treasury allocations. They're pursuing the use case where their accessibility advantage matters most, bringing financial services to populations excluded from traditional banking. Pi mentions merchants testing payments in local commerce. This is the critical milestone that transforms accessibility into actual utility. Merchant acceptance is how cryptocurrency becomes usable rather than just holdable. But testing and adoption are dramatically different. Testing means a handful of merchants in pilot programs experimenting with accepting Pi. Adoption means widespread merchant acceptance, creating genuine payment optionality for users. So, the big question Pi really needs to answer is, how many merchants are actually accepting Pi? And, in which cities is this happening? Also, how many transactions are being processed, and at what average transaction value? Are we looking at one-time experiments here, or are these sustained business relationships? And finally, do merchants tend to hold on to Pi, or do they immediately convert it to their local currency? Without these kinds of metrics, local merchant testing could mean, well, almost anything, from a robust payment infrastructure all the way down to just a dozen shopkeepers and pilot programs that may or may not continue. Pi really needs to move from just testing to actual scaling, and that means providing public data that clearly demonstrates real traction. Pi's investment in YouTube educational content, like tutorials on app building, payment processing, and user onboarding walkthroughs, honestly represents genuine infrastructure building that most projects tend to overlook. Sustainable adoption, after all, requires educated users who actually understand not just how to hold tokens, but how to actively participate in the ecosystem. So, educational content actually serves multiple purposes. It reduces support burden by answering common questions proactively, and it empowers users to become developers, merchants, and ecosystem builders, instead of just being passive holders. Plus, it demonstrates project maturity beyond just token distribution. But here's the thing, education only matters if there's something useful to learn. YouTube tutorials teaching users how to build on Pi's infrastructure are valuable only if that infrastructure actually exists and enables meaningful applications. So, educational investment is necessary, but honestly, insufficient. You also need the underlying platform capabilities that make education worthwhile. Pi announced a community governance vote for January 22, 2026, a specific near-term date that really creates accountability. This vote is positioned as evidence of decentralized governance, demonstrating that the community controls Pi's direction rather than just the core team. Governance voting is how blockchain projects prove decentralization claims aren't just marketing. Bitcoin's decentralization is evidenced by contentious forks and miner or developer disagreements. Ethereum's decentralization manifests through DAO proposals and community-driven protocol changes. Pi needs similar evidence that power genuinely distributes across the community. But, governance theater is common in crypto. Projects conduct votes where outcomes are predetermined, where participation is restricted to insiders, or where the vote subjects are trivial rather than substantive. The January 22, 2026 vote will reveal whether Pi's governance is authentic or just performative. Several factors determine whether governance is real. First, participation breadth. What percentage of Pi's 50 million users can actually vote? Are there barriers preventing participation? Is voting accessible globally or restricted by region, KYC, or token holdings? Next, subject significance. What is being voted on? Are these trivial decisions, like logo colors or marketing slogans, or substantive governance topics such as protocol changes, treasury allocation, or development priorities? Then, outcome uncertainty. Is the result genuinely uncertain, reflecting diverse community opinions, or is it just a formality confirming a predetermined direction? And finally, implementation commitment. If the community votes for a direction contrary to core team preferences, does that direction truly get implemented, or does the team retain override authority? Pi's credibility partly depends on how this January vote unfolds. If it demonstrates genuine community control over meaningful decisions with broad participation and uncertain outcomes, it validates decentralization claims. But if it's controlled, limited, or symbolic, it reveals centralization regardless of any governance rhetoric. So, the trust rebuilding challenge is real. Pi acknowledges that criticism slowed progress and that they're working to rebuild trust through transparency and steady improvements. This kind of self-awareness is honestly a lot healthier than projects that just deny problems or attack critics. Trust rebuilding, really requires consistent delivery over extended periods. Single announcements don't restore credibility. It's sustained execution that shows promises actually translate to reality. Pi's challenge is maintaining momentum through the messy middle, where progress is, incremental rather than dramatic. The January 22, 2026 governance vote represents an opportunity to demonstrate trustworthiness through action. If the vote process is transparent, participatory, and consequential, it builds trust. But if it appears staged or meaningless, it damages trust even further. Before we wrap with my assessment of whether Pi's utility pivot is credible, I need to see that engagement. If this analysis examining governance credibility, emerging market strategy, and educational infrastructure is giving you frameworks to evaluate any blockchain project's execution, hit that like button right now. And for those who want analysis that demands accountability beyond announcements, subscribe to TJ Crypto World. Alright, here's my honest take. Pi's strategic focus on emerging markets' mobile accessibility and utility over speculation is directionally sound. These really represent legitimate paths to cryptocurrency adoption that differ from, institutional treasury allocations or DeFi speculation. The educational investment through YouTube actually demonstrates an understanding that sustainable adoption requires user knowledge, not just token distribution. The governance vote creates a specific, near-term accountability moment where, claims about decentralization face test. The mobile-first, low-energy model genuinely removes barriers preventing billions from participating in cryptocurrency. This accessibility achievement really shouldn't be dismissed, even while questioning other aspects of execution. So, when we talk about local merchant testing, it's really important that we move from just making claims to actually showing data, like how many merchants are really involved, how many transactions are being processed, and in which specific cities is this happening. What's the actual growth trajectory here? Without solid metrics, honestly, this all just stays in the realm of aspiration. Now, when we hear about strong activity in Nigeria, Brazil, and Vietnam, we really need to see some evidence. Are there active user counts? What about transaction volumes or payment processing statistics? Do we have any geographic distribution data? The crypto space, as you probably know, is full of projects that claim adoption but don't provide supporting evidence. Okay, so the YouTube educational content is definitely out there, and that's something we can verify, but does it actually lead to measurable ecosystem growth? Are there developer activity statistics, DApp creation rates, or payment adoption metrics to back that up? Education is great, but it really only matters if it produces real outcome. Community governance vote represents Pi's most immediate credibility test. The specificity of the date creates accountability. We'll all see what actually happens. If the vote demonstrates broad participation, a transparent process, meaningful subject matter, and genuine outcome uncertainty, it validates Pi's decentralization claims and builds trust. But, if it's limited participation on trivial subjects with predetermined outcomes, it really just confirms skepticism about centralization. This vote matters more than any conference keynote or roadmap announcement because it's observable, participatory, and time-bound. January 22, 2026 isn't a distant future promise, it's an imminent accountability moment. So, here's how I'm looking at things. I'm watching Pi through execution metrics, not narrative positioning. The utility-first strategy is philosophically correct, but, philosophy doesn't create value. Execution does. Alright, show me merchant adoption data with transaction volumes. Show me geographic expansion statistics from Nigeria, Brazil, and Vietnam, along with user growth rates. Show me the January 22 governance vote with transparent participation metrics and, consequential outcomes. And show me educational content that's actually translating to measurable developer activity. Pi has the right strategy, emerging market focus, mobile accessibility utility over speculation, educational investment, and community governance. But now they just need to prove that their execution depth really matches that strategic sophistication. If the January 22, 2026 vote demonstrates genuine decentralization, if merchant adoption data emerges validating local commerce claims, and if emerging market traction becomes quantifiable rather than anecdotal, Pi will have earned credibility beyond roadmap promises. Until then, this represents continued strategic positioning without the measurable milestones that transform vision into validated execution. Alright, crypto fam, that's the complete breakdown. Pi Network's utility-first pivot, their emerging market merchant strategy, YouTube educational investment, and the January 22, 2026 governance vote that tests decentralization claims. Massive respect to everyone who made it to the end. You're evaluating projects through execution accountability rather than just accepting narrative positioning, and that's how you separate builders from storytellers. Before you go, check out my latest analysis on a relevant topic where I break down a really interesting hook. The community discussions there are adding incredible perspectives you won't find anywhere else. Drop your thoughts below. Does Pi's utility focus inspire confidence, or do you need measurable merchant adoption data before believing the pivot? Will you participate in the January 22, 2026 governance vote? What would prove to you that their emerging market strategy is working? I read every comment, and diverse perspectives create the best discussions. Until next time, this is TJ from TJ Crypto World reminding you, strategic pivots mean nothing without execution depth. YouTube tutorials matter only if infrastructure justifies education. Governance votes reveal decentralization reality, demand measurable proof, not just narrative positioning. Stay sharp, stay skeptical, and never confuse announcements with achievements. Peace.